Rain slicked across the glass towers of Seattle like sheets of silver, the city humming with life even past midnight. From the penthouse floor of Horizon Technologies, Logan Pierce stood motionless. At the window, his reflection a dark silhouette against the restless glow of neon. The skyline spread beneath him, magnificent and alive. Yet all he felt was a familiar hollowness gnawing inside his chest. At 42, he had everything the world admired: power, prestige, billions and assets, but as the press whispered with a mix of awe and disdain, Logan Pierce was the Ice King, calculating, detached, untouchable. He loosened his tie, more out of routine than relief, and turned away from the view. The board had moved tomorrow's meeting up to 8 a.m. Another acquisition demanded his approval, and another deal waited on his signature. Always more, never enough. The empire he had built consumed him piece by piece, leaving nothing behind but late nights and sterile penthouses. He descended in a private elevator, without a word, the hum of the machinery his only company, and stepped into the underground garage, where his Bentley awaited like a silent predator. The engine purred to life as he slid behind the wheel, the vehicle's soft leather cradling him with manufactured perfection. Rain hammered down harder when he emerged onto the near-empty streets. Wipers clawed at the windshield in a losing battle. The world reduced to blurred streaks of color and shadow. Traffic lights glowed red, pooling against the wet asphalt. As Logan eased to a stop near Pioneer Square, he tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, distracted, mind already rehearsing strategies for tomorrow. That was when he saw her. Under the narrow cover of a crumbling awning stood a woman, shoulders hunched against the storm. One hand rested protectively on the swell of her belly, the other clutching an umbrella so battered it was more skeleton than shelter. Rain plastered her dark hair to her cheeks, rivulets racing down her worn jacket. She looked fragile in the downpour, yet there was something unyielding in the set of her spine. As though she refused to let the storm see her break, Logan's first instinct was to look away. He never stopped, never deviated from his plan, never let the unpredictable intrude. People in need were problems best handled by others, charities, assistants, anyone but him. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't name, his hand hovered over the window control. The Ice King did not invite strangers into his world. Yet the words slipped from his mouth before he could stop them. "Do you need a ride?" The woman froze, her wary eyes catching the gleam of his headlights. For a long heartbeat she didn't move, as if weighing danger against desperation. Thunder cracked above them, the storm answering for her. She nodded once, swift and reluctant, and hurried across the slick street toward the car. When she settled into the leather seat, her voice was soft, cautious. "Thank you." Water dripped from her jacket onto the immaculate interior. Logan noticed, but for once, said nothing. He studied her from the corner of his eye as the wipers resumed their rhythm. She was younger than him, perhaps early 30s, the damp ponytail, the exhaustion shadowing her features, the protective hand on her belly, all ordinary details. Yet there was a tug in the back of his mind, a faint sense of recognition that refused to resolve. "Where to?" he asked, his tone clipped, businesslike. "Oak Heights," she replied, naming a working-class neighborhood far from the glittering district he called home. They drove in silence, the city sliding by in blurred fragments of neon and rain. Logan told himself it was nothing, just a stranger, just a good deed done in passing. But when the woman finally spoke again, her voice carried a quiet certainty that unsettled him. "You're Logan Pierce." Not a question. He kept his eyes fixed on the road. "I am. Have we met?" Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. "Once, a long time ago." Something in her tone tightened the air in the car. Logan's grip on the steering wheel hardened. He had met thousands of people, shaken hands, exchanged pleasantries, forgotten names before the ink on business cards had dried. But this woman spoke with a conviction that made his heart beat just a little faster. The wipers beat their steady rhythm. The storm raged outside, and for the first time in years, Logan Pierce felt the faint edge of suspense coil in his chest. She knew him. He did not remember her, and yet, somehow, he sensed that what began at this red light would not end tonight. The rain followed them like a relentless shadow, pelting the Bentley's windshield as Logan steered through the narrow veins of the city. He had driven these streets countless times before, usually insulated by music or silence, yet tonight, every sound seemed magnified: the rhythmic swish of wipers, the drumming of water against glass, the faint hiss of tires on slick asphalt, The woman sat angled slightly away from him, one arm protectively round her swollen belly, her other hand fidgeting with the torn strap of her purse. She said nothing, but the tension radiating from her filled the car more heavily than the storm. "Outside, Olivia," she said suddenly, her voice soft but cutting through the rain. Olivia Mitchell. The name landed in Logan's mind like a stone dropped into still water, ripples echoing backward through years he had tried to forget. He searched, pulling fragments from the archives of his memory, champagne flutes clinking. At a merger celebration, laughter too unguarded for the corporate setting, eyes that saw through his polished exterior. And then nothing. The next morning he had boarded a flight to Tokyo, and the night had faded into the blur of acquisitions and quarterly reports. "I can't say I remember," he replied carefully, though unease tugged at him. He prided himself on recall, on never letting details slip, but here was a blank space he couldn't fill. Her lips curved into a half smile, not bitter, but knowing. "You wouldn't. Men like you never do." The remark stung, though Logan masked it with silence. He told himself she was just another person from his orbit, someone whose life had brushed against his briefly before disappearing again. Yet something about her presence refused to be dismissed. The car turned off the main road, the skyline shrinking behind them as they entered Oak Heights. The glossy storefronts gave way to cracked sidewalks, sagging porches, and flickering streetlights that threw more shadow than light. Logan rarely ventured into this part of the city. It wasn't his world. Yet tonight, he felt the weight of being an intruder when he pulled up to a weathered duplex. Olivia murmured a quiet thank you, reaching for the door handle, but Logan, propelled by an impulse he barely understood, said, "Wait, let me walk you in. It's pouring." She hesitated, studying him as though searching for hidden motives. Finally, she nodded. They stepped into the storm together, Logan removing his jacket and holding it above her head. For a moment, the billionaire and the nursing student were equals beneath the same patch of fabric, rain soaking through his expensive suit as easily as her thin sweater. Before they reached the steps, the door swung open. A small figure stood in the frame, a boy of 5, barefoot in pajamas, his hair damp from sleep. His eyes, wide and curious, fixed on Logan, and Logan froze. The boy's gaze was like a mirror, strikingly gray, sharp in the same way Logan's own eyes had been described in magazine profiles. The tilt of his chin, the curve of his cheekbones, it was like staring into a photograph of himself as a child. "Mommy, you're home," the boy said, his voice carrying innocent relief. Then, narrowing his eyes at Logan, he asked the question that sent the ground tilting beneath the billionaire's feet. "Who are you?" The storm seemed to hush around them, the downpour fading into a muffled backdrop as Logan's breath caught in his throat. His hand slipped from the jacket draped above Olivia's head. He was transfixed, unable to speak, unable to look away from the boy who carried his face. Olivia's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "Mason, this is Mr. Pierce. He gave Mommy a ride home." Mason tilted his head, considering Logan, with a seriousness beyond his years. Then he stepped closer, small fingers curling around the doorframe. "Thank you for helping my mom. Our car broke again." Logan's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to form words, but his voice had deserted him. His mind raced with calculations, the timing, the memory of that forgotten night, the familiarity that had nagged him since Olivia entered the car. It wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. "Come inside," Olivia said quietly, her eyes locking on his. There was no challenge in them, no anger, just inevitability, as if she had always known this confrontation would come. Inside, the duplex was modest but filled with life, children's drawings taped to the fridge, textbooks stacked on the dining table, a toy truck abandoned on the floor. Logan stood awkwardly near the door, water dripping from his suit as Mason scampered to fetch a snack. Olivia turned, her hand pressing against her belly. "He's mine," she said, voice calm but weighted with years of secrecy. Then, after a pause that seemed to stretch forever, she added, "And so is this one." The world tilted again. Logan's vision tunneled, his empire of glass towers and billion-dollar deals suddenly collapsing into something far smaller, but infinitely heavier. The boy in the other room was his son. The child she carried was his, too. For the first time in years, Logan pierced the Ice King, the visionary. The billionaire felt the ground shift beneath him in a way no market crash, no hostile takeover had ever managed. He wasn't facing an acquisition, he was facing a revelation. and he had no idea what to do next. The storm outside had softened into a steady drizzle, but inside Olivia's modest duplex the air felt charged, heavy with words unspoken. Logan remained standing near the door, drenched and disoriented, while Olivia eased herself onto the worn couch, her hand never leaving the curve of her belly. For a man who could close billion-dollar mergers with a single phone call, Logan Pierce found himself unable to summon even a sentence. His eyes kept drifting to the hallway where Mason had disappeared, the image of that child's gray eyes burning into him like a brand. "You knew." He finally managed, his voice rough. "You knew, you never." Olivia cut him off sharply. "Never told you. Do you think I didn't try, Logan?" The words struck with such force that he stepped back, like a man unprepared for a blow. Her voice wasn't angry for anger's sake, it was laced with exhaustion. Years of frustration condensed into a single moment. "I came to your office 3 times after I found out I was pregnant," she continued, her gaze fixed on him, unflinching. "I left messages. I begged to speak with you. But your assistant, your fortress of polished smiles and locked doors, made sure I never got near you. Do you think I wanted to raise a child alone? Do you think I wanted Mason to grow up without knowing who his father was?" Logan's jaw clenched. Images of Victoria, efficient, ruthless, protective to the point of cruelty, flashed through his mind. How many distractions had she quietly erased from his life, all in the name of efficiency? What had slipped through the cracks while he had been too consumed with empire building to notice? "You could have written," he said weakly, but even as the words left his mouth, he hated himself for them. "I did," Olivia whispered. 3 letters, all returned. I even sent a certified one 6 months after Mason was born. Do you know what happened?" Her eyes shimmered, but her voice stayed steady. "Your company signed for it. It never reached you." The room was silent, but for the hum of the refrigerator, Logan felt the weight of his empire pressing down on him. Not in boardrooms or stock tickers, but here, in this small duplex where crayons littered the table and bills were stacked like fragile towers. His empire had stolen 5 years of fatherhood from him, and he hadn't even noticed. Mason reappeared, clutching a bowl of cereal, his small feet patting against the linoleum. He climbed onto the couch beside Olivia, looking between them with the blunt curiosity only a child possessed. "Why do you look mad at mommy?" he asked, spoon poised midair. Logan knelt, lowering himself until his eyes were level with Mason's. "I'm not mad at your mom," he said, voice trembling despite his effort to steady it. "I'm mad at myself." Mason blinked, chewing. Thoughtfully, "Mom says you're rich," he said matter-of-factly. "Then why do you look so sad?" The question sliced deeper than any boardroom betrayal ever had. Logan opened his mouth, but no answer came. Instead, he felt something collapse inside him, walls he had spent decades building crumbling under the innocent weight of a child's question. Olivia smoothed Mason's hair, her other hand trembling slightly on her belly. "Go wash up, sweetheart," she said gently, "then we'll read your book." When Mason patted down the hall again, Logan stood and faced her. The cold detachment that had carried him through empire building no longer fit him. It felt foreign, like armor cracking under its own weight. "I missed 5 years," he said, the words tasting bitter. 5 years I could never get back." "Yes," Olivia replied, her tone sharp, but not cruel. "And you don't get to just walk in and fix it like one of your deals. Mason doesn't need a CEO. He needs a father who shows up every single day. And I don't know if you're capable of that." Her words hung between them like a verdict. Outside, the drizzle deepened, streaking the windows with silver trails. Logan's phone buzzed in his pocket, likely Victoria, likely the board, but he ignored it for the first time in years. He stepped closer, his voice low, stripped of its usual steel. "I don't care what it takes. I won't miss another day. Not with him, not with her." His gaze flicked to her belly. Olivia studied him in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she exhaled, the sound weighted with years of disappointment. "Promises are easy for men like you, but consistency, that's what Mason deserves. That's what I deserve." A cry from the bedroom interrupted them, Mason calling for his snack. Olivia rose carefully, her hand on her belly for balance, leaving Logan standing in the quiet room, surrounded by evidence of a life he had been denied. The drawings on the fridge, the worn couch cushions, the smell of cereal. It was a universe, apart from the glass towers of Horizon Technologies. For the first time in his life, Logan Pierce realized he was facing a negotiation where numbers meant nothing. This wasn't about acquisitions or shareholders. This was about proving to a woman who had every reason to doubt him, and to a little boy who carried his eyes, that he was worth a place in their world. And for once, he wasn't sure if he had the power to close this deal. The night after their confrontation, Logan didn't return to his penthouse. He couldn't. The idea of retreating to those sterile glass walls, where every surface gleamed but nothing felt alive, filled him with a sudden revulsion. Instead, he sat in his Bentley, parked just beyond the corner of Olivia Street, the engine off, the rain tapping against the roof in quiet rhythm. His phone lit up again and again, calls from Victoria, urgent texts from board members, but he silenced them all. For once, the Empire could wait. When dawn broke, gray and tired, he was still there. The sight of Mason bounding out the front door with a backpack nearly too big for him jolted Logan from his haze. Olivia followed, one hand steady in her belly, her eyes sweeping the street warily as though she already sensed the storm that would eventually find them. Logan stepped out of the car, his suit wrinkled, his hair unkempt. The Ice King, disheveled Dot Mason, froze at the sight of him. "You're still here," the boy said, a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. Logan crouched down, the movement awkward but deliberate. "I told you I would be." Olivia tightened her grip on Mason's shoulder, her gaze sharp. "He doesn't need confusion, Logan. He needs stability." Logan's chest tightened. "Then let me be that. At least try." He extended his hand to Mason, not commanding, just offering. The boy hesitated, then slipped his small fingers into Logan's palm. Olivia's expression flickered fear, resistance, and something dangerously close to surrender. The drive to school was quiet, but Logan found himself memorizing every detail, the way Mason's feet didn't quite touch the floor, the scuffed edges of his backpack, the excitement in his voice when he spoke about a science project involving baking soda volcanoes. At the gates, Mason looked at him with a seriousness that seemed old for his years. "Are you coming back?" "Yes," Logan said, the word landing like an oath. "I will always come back." Olivia didn't speak the entire ride home. Only when they reached the duplex did she turn to him. "You don't get to say always unless you mean it, Logan." Mason's had enough people walk away. That night, Logan returned not to demand entry, but to fix the leaky sink Mason had mentioned with childish bluntness. Olivia watched him from the doorway, arms crossed, suspicion radiating from every line of her body. Water sprayed, tools clattered, and Logan cursed softly under his breath. Mason giggled from the kitchen table, delighted to see the billionaire Ice King humbled by a stubborn pipe. For once, Logan laughed to a raw, unguarded sound that startled him as much as it startled Olivia. Days became a rhythm. Morning, drop-offs at school, evenings of patch leaks and squeaky doors, trips to the corner store for cookie dough ice cream, because Mason declared it the best flavor in the world. Logan found himself slipping into their lives, not as a visitor, but as something else, something terrifying and fragile. Yet the Empire did not sleep. His phone buzzed endlessly during bedtime stories, during Olivia's weary smiles across the dinner table, during Mason's chatter about playground politics. Victoria's messages grew sharper, her frustration bleeding through polite corporate phrasing. "Your absences are being noticed. The board is concerned. We need you focused." But Logan was focused for the first time in years, focused on something real. He silenced his phone. The Ice King was learning warmth, awkwardly, unevenly, but undeniably. One evening, as rain streaked the windows again, Mason climbed onto the couch beside him, a picture book in his hands. Logan read, his voice steady, until Mason leaned against him and whispered a single word that shook him more than any hostile takeover ever had. "Dad." The room seemed to tilt. Olivia, from across the kitchen, froze, her hand on a stack of medical textbooks. Mason didn't notice the silence. He was already drifting toward sleep, trusting, safe. Logan stared down at the boy, his throat tight, his vision blurred. He had faced boardrooms filled with predators. He had stared down market crashes and clawed his way through betrayals. None of it had prepared him for this, the weight of being called Dad for the first time. Later, when Olivia tucked Mason into bed, she lingered at the doorway, her voice low. "He doesn't hand out that word easily. Don't make him regret it." Logan met her gaze. For once, he didn't reach for promises or polished reassurances. He only said, "I won't." But even as he spoke, a storm was gathering beyond there. Fragile peace, cameras, headlines, whispers in boardrooms. Logan felt it in the air, pressing closer, inevitable. The world he had built with steel and glass was about to collide with the fragile one he had stumbled into on a rain-slick night. And when it happened, he would have to choose empire or family. For the first time in his life, Logan knew which side he was on. The first crack in their fragile new world appeared on a gray Thursday morning. Logan was walking Mason to school, his tie loosened, his suit jacket carrying the smell of coffee and pancake batter. Mason swung his backpack like a weapon, laughing, as he told Logan about how he and his friend Jacob were building the biggest Lego tower in history. For a moment, Logan let himself believe this could last, that he could slip seamlessly from empire builder to father without consequence. But the moment they reached the school gates, Logan noticed it, a camera flash, subtle, quick, hidden among the crowd of parents with phones. His instincts, honed from years of hostile negotiations, flared instantly. He scanned the crowd, eyes narrowing. A man with a baseball cap turned away too quickly. Another lingered with a camera slung across his chest, pretending to adjust it. Logan's stomach dropped. By evening, the story was everywhere. Billionaire tech titan Logan Pierce spotted escorting mystery child to school. The photos showed him crouched to Mason's height, his son's gray eyes shining as though the resemblance needed no commentary. Olivia's name surfaced within hours. Someone had done their homework. Her nursing records, her duplex address, even her history as a temporary worker at Horizon during the merger years. When Logan arrived at the duplex that night, the street was lined with vans, their satellite dishes raised like weapons. Cameras pointed toward the small house where his son slept. Neighbors stood on porches shouting at the reporters to leave. Olivia was at the window, face pale, one hand on the curtain, the other cradling her belly. "You brought this here," she said. When he burst through the door, rain dripping off his suit, her voice wasn't angry, it was terrified. "They know about Mason. They know about me." Logan's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. Victoria's name lit up the screen, followed by message after message. Board emergency, investors in, meltdown, hostile bid possible. He silenced it. "Pack a bag," he said firmly. "We can't stay here. I can't just disappear." Olivia shot back, her voice cracking. "This is Mason's home, his school, my life. It's not safe." Logan's voice was sharper than he intended, but the sight of Mason peeking nervously from the hallway shredded his composure. "They will camp on this lawn, follow him to school, turn every part of your life into headlines. Do you want him growing up with that?" Olivia's shoulders sagged, fear battling exhaustion. "Where will we even go?" Logan's eyes darkened with determination. "Somewhere no one will think to look for me, within the hour." His private helicopter cut through the storm, blades thrumming as Olivia clutched Mason close, her other hand gripping Logan's sleeve. They landed 3 hours later at a forgotten property Logan had purchased years ago. As a potential development site, a weathered cabin on the edge of Lake Chelan, it was rustic, untouched, hidden by towering pines, a place even his closest advisors had forgotten. Mason's fear gave way to excitement. "We're on an adventure," he shouted, racing to the lake's edge to marvel at ducks bobbing in the twilight. Olivia, though, stood on the porch, arms crossed, scanning the shadows. "This isn't a life, Logan. It's hiding. It's temporary," he promised, though a part of him wondered if that was true. For the first time in years, he felt the sharp edge of vulnerability, his empire, his carefully constructed image, all unraveling. But standing there with Olivia's silhouette framed against the fading sky, and Mason's laughter echoing across the lake, Logan understood something he had never admitted in boardrooms. He had something to lose now, something real. Back in Seattle, the empire he had built was bleeding. Stock prices plummeted. The board convened in secret, whispers of removal swirling like vultures. Victoria's carefully orchestrated coup was underway, leveraging his distraction to dismantle the neural interface project, the one innovation Logan believed could change millions of lives. At the cabin, however, Logan found himself tangled in a different kind of battle. He burned his shoes kneeling in the mud to help Mason build a rock dam. He stayed awake through Olivia's restless nights, steadying her when pain pulled sharp breaths from her lungs. One evening, when she pressed his hand against her belly, he felt his daughter kick for the first time. The sensation was electric, more powerful than any closing bell or market victory, but the storm outside was closing in. Reporters hunted for the cabin, investors threatened a hostile takeover, and Olivia's health was faltering, her pregnancy edging toward dangerous territory. One night, As Mason slept curled against his stuffed penguin, Olivia whispered across the dim cabin, "You can't live in two worlds forever, Logan. You'll have to choose." Her words hung in the stillness, heavy and inescapable, for a man who had always chosen profit. The path had been clear, but as he listened to his son's breathing, as he felt the weight of Olivia's gaze, as he remembered the pulse of his daughter beneath his hand, Logan realized the choice had already been made. The only question was whether the empire he had built would survive the man he was becoming. The antiseptic sting of hospital corridors was not a place Logan Pierce had ever imagined himself at 2 in the morning. For decades his nights had belonged to red-eye flights, midnight strategy calls, champagne in private lounges, but now he was pacing a maternity wing, his tie undone, his hair disheveled, every nerve in his body stretched to breaking. Olivia lay behind double doors, monitors beeping in urgent rhythm, while his unborn daughter fought for her life. It had started hours earlier at the lake cabin. Olivia had woken from sleep with a gasp, one hand pressed to her belly, her nightgown stained with blood. Mason had bolted upright, clutching his stuffed penguin, his eyes wide with terror. "Is Mommy dying?" he whispered. Logan scooped him into his arms, his own heart hammering as he barked orders into his phone. Within minutes, the cabin's silence was shattered by the thunder of helicopter blades. They lifted into the stormy night, Olivia pale but conscious, Logan's hand gripping her so tightly he feared he might hurt her. A Seattle Presbyterian specialist swarmed the moment they landed. Placental abruption, the gray-haired doctor explained with clinical calm. "We need to prepare for an emergency C-section. The baby's heartbeat is unstable." Now Logan waited, powerless in a way no boardroom had ever made him feel. His phone buzzed in his pocket, relentless, insistent. He glanced at the screen. "Victoria, emergency board vote in 1 hour. Investors pushing takeover. Attend or lose horizon." He almost laughed, a harsh sound in the sterile hall. The empire was burning. His life's work was under siege, but his family was behind those doors. He silenced the phone without a second thought. For once, the Ice King would not show up to defend his throne. The door swung open, and a nurse beckoned him inside. He changed into scrubs with trembling hands, then entered the operating room. Olivia lay beneath a blue surgical drape, her eyes searching for him the moment he stepped in. He took her hand, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "Talk to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Distract me." So he did, not with numbers or acquisitions, but with a vision he had never spoken aloud. "We'll move into the house with the oak tree out back. Mason will have a tree house. You'll plant the garden you always wanted. And his voice cracked, "I'll be there every night to tuck them in." Her grip tightened. "Don't make promises you can't keep." The surgeon's voice cut through. "We're ready. Baby's coming." Time folded in on itself. Logan barely breathed until he heard it, a thin, furious cry that filled the room like a miracle. "She's small, but strong," the nurse announced, placing the newborn on Olivia's chest. Emma Catherine Pierce, 5 pounds, 3 ounces. Her tiny fist clenched, her stubborn cry refusing to be ignored. Logan stared, overwhelmed, his hand trembling as he touched her miniature fingers. When they curled instinctively around his own, something inside him broke open. Power, wealth, control, none of it mattered. This tiny life, this fragile bond, this was the only empire worth protecting. Hours later, Olivia slept in recovery. Emma nestled against her. Mason, refusing to leave the hospital, had finally drifted off in a chair, wrapped in Logan's suit jacket. Logan sat between them all, phone in hand, staring at a storm of missed calls and headlines. Pierce absent from emergency vote. Board moves to remove CEO. Victoria's final message glared at him. "You've lost everything." Logan looked around the room. Olivia's pale but peaceful face, Mason's small body curled in sleep, Emma's steady breathing against her mother's chest. He typed one reply. "No. I finally found everything, but the war wasn't over." Outside, vultures circled, his company clawing for power. Inside, betrayal still festered. He had yet to confront the truth that Olivia had once tried to reach him, only to be silenced by those closest to him. As dawn painted the hospital windows, Logan made a vow. He would not return to his empire as the Ice King. He would return as a man who knew exactly what he was fighting for, and this time, no board, no assistant, no betrayal would stand in his way. The empire could wait. His family could not. The hospital room had become a battlefield disguised in soft lighting and antiseptic calm. Olivia lay resting with Emma nestled against her chest. Mason snoring in a chair beneath Logan's suit jacket. The rhythmic beeping of monitors was the soundtrack to the most fragile peace Logan had ever known, but he knew outside these walls, chaos reigned. Horizon Technologies' his empire, his legacy was under attack. The board was circling like wolves, and Victoria was leading the hunt. When Richard Winters, his private investigator and oldest ally, entered the hospital room, his expression was grave. Logan slipped into the hallway with him, closing the door gently behind them. "Tell me," Logan demanded, voice low but sharp. Richard handed him a folder, thick with documents. It wasn't just incompetence, Logan, it was sabotage. Olivia tried to reach you, calls, emails, even a certified letter, all intercepted. Your assistant made sure nothing got through, and it gets worse. She paid off Olivia's supervisor at Horizon to end her contract when her pregnancy became noticeable. Forced her out quietly so you'd never notice a missing temp in a sea of names. Logan's vision darkened, the sterile corridor blurring around him. 6 years of fatherhood stolen. 6 years of Mason's laughter, his scraped knees, his first words all stolen by the very people he trusted to protect his time. His empire had not just distracted him, it had conspired against him. Victoria, he whispered, the name tasting like ash. There's more, Richard continued, grimly. The leak about Mason, about Olivia, traced straight back to her. Emails. Financial trails, it's airtight. She wanted to ruin you publicly so she could position herself as the stabilizing force for the board. Logan closed the folder with a snap, his jaw tightening. For years he had been called the Ice King because nothing rattled him, because he wielded ruthlessness like a weapon. But standing here, stripped of empire and betrayed to his core, he realized something. The Ice King had been weak. Coldness hadn't protected him, it had blinded him. What burned in his chest now was not ice, but fire. The board convened that afternoon via emergency session. Logan refused to leave the hospital, refused to leave Olivia's side. Instead, he set up his laptop on a small table by her bed, angled the camera so that the sterile hospital room was his backdrop. Olivia stirred, watching him with tired but steady eyes. Are you sure about this? She asked softly. He kissed Emma's forehead and settled into the chair. For the first time in my life, I'm sure about everything. When the call connected, 12 faces filled the screen. Board members, investors, predators who smelled blood. Victoria sat at the head of the long mahogany table in the corporate boardroom, her posture flawless, her expression a mask of authority. Mr. Pierce, Howard Reeves began, voice heavy with forced civility. This is highly unorthodox. You've missed critical sessions. The market has lost confidence. We must consider leadership change. Logan raised a hand, cutting him off. Save the performance. You want to oust me, do it honestly, but before you cast your vote, there are things you need to see. He slid Richard's file across the desk and into the camera's view. Screens lit up around the table as board members opened the evidence emails. Payment receipts, intercepted calls. Gasps echoed as the truth unfolded. Victoria had orchestrated the leak, sabotaged his personal life, and compromised the very integrity of Horizon. Victoria's composure cracked. This is outrageous. He's manipulating you. No, Logan said, his voice ablade. You manipulated them. You manipulated me. And worst of all, you manipulated a child's life for leverage. He leaned closer, his gray eyes burning. I don't forgive that. Ever. The room fell into stunned silence. One by one, board members turned their gaze away from Victoria. Her empire of control crumbled in real time, the power she'd stolen dissolving under the weight of undeniable proof. Logan straightened, his tone calm, but unyielding. Here is my proposal. I will step back from day-to-day operations. Horizon will have a new coup-to-manage structure, reporting directly to the board. I will remain as head of innovation and product development, because no one in this room understands the neural interface project like I do. And if Horizon dares to abandon it, he let the pause drag, deliberate. I will take it elsewhere. Privately funded, competitively launched. You all know what that would mean for the company. The threat was not spoken like a threat. It was a promise, heavy as iron. Howard Reeves cleared his throat, the first to break the silence. Your terms have merit. We will vote. But Logan wasn't finished. He turned his gaze on Victoria, his voice lowering. You will resign, effective immediately, if you resist. This evidence goes public your career, your reputation, your freedom. Consider this mercy. For the first time in years, Victoria faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her empire, like Logan's ice, was gone. When the vote concluded, Logan ended the call without waiting for pleasantries. He closed the laptop and turned back to Olivia. Her eyes shone with something new: respect, maybe even belief. You risked everything, she whispered. No, he replied, glancing at Mason asleep and Emma stirring in her crib. I finally risked nothing that mattered. 1 year later, the house with the oak tree stood filled with life. Mason raced through the yard with his skateboard. Emma babbled from Olivia's arms, and the sound of laughter replaced the silence that once haunted Logan's nights. The empire still existed, stronger, steadier, but Logan no longer lived for its walls of glass. One evening, Mason dragged him into the garage, unveiling a wooden rocking chair restored by Olivia and her mother. Carved into its backrest were the words, "For the stories yet to come." Logan sat, pulling Mason onto one knee, Emma onto the other. His eyes met Olivia's across the room, and for the first time in his life, he felt something that money could never buy. Wholeness. The ice king was gone. In his place was a man who had finally learned the true meaning of wealth, a family that was his, and a future no empire could ever take.